Okay, this is chapter 3, problem 7, the paint calculator problem. This is out of the 7th edition book, and this is probably the most complicated program that we've gone through so far. So in it we're going to take some values from the user about the dimensions of a room, length, width, and height of a rectangular room, and then we're going to make a bunch of these calculations right here. So to kind of cut things a little bit shorter, I've already gone ahead and done the getting the user input in the main method here. So the main method prompts the user for the length, width, and height of the rectangular room, and then we're going to pass these three values to a method that does a lot of these things here. And in fact, we'll need two methods to do all this stuff described here. And then finally it says the main method displays the final price. So alright, so we're going to go through and this method, the first method, kind of computes the price. So I'm going to go in here and public static void. I'm going to call this thing compute price, and so I'll have a method body right here. So that's what I'll start with. And by the way, if this stuff seems unfamiliar to you, then you should go back and take a look at some of the other chapter 3 videos before this one, and this works exactly the same way as in those other videos, and I go into a little bit more detail about this part here. Okay, so I'm going to cut and paste all this stuff so I won't have to keep scrolling back and forth. I'm just going to cut and paste it down here and make these into comments. So that's a single line comment. This is going to be a multi-line comment. Single line comment. Multi-line comment. And a single line comment here. Okay, so I'm going to go through and do each one of these pieces right here. Alright, so first off, we need to calculate the wall area for a room. So I'm going to define a variable of type double called wall area, and I need to compute the wall area. And in order to do that, right, I am going to need this input that I got from the user, the length, the width, and the height of the room. So I'm just going to put that in here. I'm going to have to pass that information to this method. So it needs three parameters, one for the length, one for the width, and one for the height. And so the wall area then will be, if we're just painting the walls, not the ceiling or the floor, right? There's going to be two walls that have area length times height, and then there's going to be two walls that have width times height as their area. And so two length times height walls, two width times height walls, and so add all those together. Those are your four walls, and you come up with the total wall area. So that's the wall area for the room. Next, we want to pass the calculated wall area to another method that calculates and returns the number of gallons needed. Okay, so down here below the compute price method, I'm going to need another method, and I'm going to call it, since it calculates the paint needed, I'm going to call it paint needed. So that's what it will look like. Okay, so first off, this is going to need the calculated wall area. I calculate the wall area here, right? And so I'm going to need to pass it into the paint needed. So that's going to have a parameter of type double. I'm going to call it total area. Okay. And then what I would do is just take and times this total area by, or divide the total area by 350, right? It says a gallon of paint covers about 350 square feet of wall space. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to define a constant of type int, or I guess double is fine, however you want to do it, square, and I'm going to call it square feet per gallon. And I'm going to initialize it to 350. Right, each gallon, right, paints 350 square feet. So 350 square feet per gallon. I'm going to define it as a constant, and then I'm going to use that named constant in my program so that later on, you know, if they say, well, you know, we're not really getting 350 square feet out of a gallon, it's more like 320, well then if you just use this named constant, you just can change it in that one place, and then it will change it everywhere it appears. Here that wouldn't be such a big deal because we're only going to use it in one spot, but it's just good practice to do things like that. It's a lot easier to find the definition in one spot than to change it in 20 spots in a more complicated program. Okay, so we're going to pass the calculated wall area to another method that calculates and returns. So we're going to have to return the number of gallons of paint needed. So that would be the total area that I've got divided by square feet per gallon. Okay, so later on, if somebody needs to go back and figure out what's going on here, it's a lot easier for them to look at this, and instead of just being 350 right here, they can say, oh, okay, that's what they assume the square feet per gallon would be. So that will give you how much paint you need. So for instance, if you had 700 square feet, divide that by 350, you'd get 2 gallons, right, for paint that you needed. Alright, so we're going to return this. Notice that total area was a double, and this was a double. And so we're returning a double right here. We need to go and change this return type, right? That void said originally that, hey, we aren't going to return anything, but we are returning something, and it's of type double, so we need to change that return type to a double. And then, so we've got this method defined out, but we actually need to call it, right? We need to sort of link up with this guy. So I'm going to define a variable to hold that return value. I'm going to call it gallons needed, and I'm going to initialize it to paint needed wall area. So what's going on here is I'm defining a variable, gallons needed, of type double, and then I'm going to initialize it, right? And here's what I'm initializing it to. I'm going to call paint needed. I'm going to call this method down here, and I'm going to pass it the contents of wall area. Whatever was computed right here, that's what's going to get dumped into total area right here. And then, so this is going to execute. It's going to return this value, and that value is going to be stored in gallons needed. So I'm saving the return type here in a variable for future use. Okay. Next up, I need to display the number of gallons needed, so I'm just going to do that with a J option pane. And I'm going to mention the total wall area in here for a total wall area of whatever wall area is. So however many square feet. End the line with the string concatenator and then continue on. And then gallons needed. That's what I the information that I store here in that variable here, that's how much paint I needed. Gallons needed. Gallons of paint. Okay, so I echoed for a total wall area of, and then I reiterated the wall area here. You don't necessarily need to do that, but there's two things, right, for somebody who's using the program. They might realize, hey, that wall area looks weird for the data that I entered, and then possibly realized, hey, I didn't enter the data right. So it could help a user catch a mistake, and it also can be used for debugging. You can catch your mistake possibly by reiterating that. If that value looks wrong, then there's probably some error in your program. So it could help you catch a runtime error. So. Okay, so I displayed the number of gallons needed to the user, and then computes the price based on a paint price of $32 per gallon, assuming the painter can buy any fraction of a gallon of paint the same price as a whole gallon. So, all right, so I'm going to up here at the top put another constant, final double, and call it dollars per gallon. And I'm going to hold on to that again. I'm defining that as a constant so that later on they can go back and just change that to whatever value. Maybe the price of paint goes up to 35, and if you had just a number 35 throughout your program, you'd have to go change it in each spot. But with a constant like that, you can just change it in one spot. And then down here, I'm going to define another variable, total price. And that would be dollars per gallon times gallons needed. And gallons needed was how many gallons of paint I needed, and then I times that by $32 per gallon here. So that's the total price. And then finally, I need to return that total price. That's the return value. So the price I needed for how much paint and area I needed. Again, total price is a double. So I'm going to go here. I had a return type of void indicating that this method wasn't returning anything, but we wanted to return a double, so I need to change the return type to double right there. Okay, so that part looks okay. The very last thing that we need to do is to, the main method displays the final price. Okay, so I need to come in here and display a message to the user. Alright, so the cost to paint a length by width foot room with height foot ceilings is okay. So now I need to get the total cost, the return value from my compute price function. So there's one of two ways you could do it. You could define a variable to hold that and then initialize it to compute price for this length, width, and height here. So you could define a new variable, or you could just put it, the method call inside this string right here, and I guess that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to compute price I'm going to call this method, and for the parameters I'm going to give it length, width, and height. And then close that off and end it there. So I put the method call in this show message dialog. Alternatively, you could put it, define a new variable, total price here, and then set it equal to compute price, length, width, and height, and then in here put total price. So I guess doing it this way saves a little bit of memory possibly, but with this program it's not a huge issue. So okay, so let's try and compile that and see what happens. Alright, it compiled okay. And so let's test it out. Let's try 15 by 20 by 10 and see if it gives us 64. So enter the length 15, enter the width 20, enter the height in feet. For a total wall area of 700 square feet, you're going to need 2 gallons of paint. And the cost to paint a 15 by 20 foot room with 10 foot ceilings is $64. Alright, let's try another. Let's try 7 by 13 by 11. Okay, and so let's do it again. The total cost to paint a 7 by 13 foot room with 11 foot ceilings is this. Alright, so when you are dealing with money here, you wouldn't really have a price like that. You would round it to 2 decimal places, and so there's a couple ways to do that. And what I'm going to do it is just use a formatted print. It's not really rounding it to 2 decimal places, but how that would work to make it look halfway decent is right in here, compute price, length, width, and height. I'm going to use the string class, and I'm going to format that. And so in quotation marks I need to put the format string, and for this one it's %.2f. So this will look at the next thing over here in commas, right, and round it to 2 decimal places is what it will do. So I have to add an extra parenthesis right here, and it should compile. But just to go over that again, I'm using the string class with the format method, and here inside the quotation marks, the first argument to the format method is the format string. And if you just want to round a single value like this to 2 decimal places, this is what you would type in there, %.2f. 2 is the number of decimal places, and this tells the computer that it's a floating point, like a decimal type number. And then the next after the comma is what you want to round. So in here I want to round the return value of compute price with length, width, and height. So, all right, let's see if that'll go. It likes it. All right. Let's run through our. So we had first example was a 15 by 20 room with 10-foot ceilings, and you can see now it has 64 with 2 decimal places there. So that looks a little nicer. Let's see what else. We had 7 by 13 with 11-foot ceilings. And you can see here it does round it. It was 20.228, so it rounds it to 2 decimal places there, $40.23. So that's one way to round it out. And so here's the completed code. I'll just scroll down. So that's the main method here, and then the compute price method that we needed, and the paint needed method.